Just started the recording again, Luann, if you may indulge me, Chair. Members are reminded this public session of the meeting is being recorded and will be shared for later publication to the public. To ensure we remain correct, I'll do a quick roll call of only the voting members. Chair, Luann Grujon.
Yep, here.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Councillor Cook.
Yep, here.
Councillor Bell.
Here, yes.
Councillor Dunbar.
Here.
Kim Cruttenden.
Here.
Alan Gray.
Here.
And John Tomlinson.
Yes, here.
Albeit not voting members, if I can just confirm that Sandra MacLeod.
Here.
And Alex Stephen are both present.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Good, so we can get going with the second half of the agenda. So we're right into item 15, lessons learned from COVID. Alison, over to you to introduce this paper.
Thank you, Luann. I don't think I need to say necessarily too much about the paper. We were asked to bring a lessons learned from COVID paper, and we've brought it now, even although we're perhaps not fully out of COVID yet, but we appreciate that we have learned a fair number of lessons. We've tried to keep the lessons learned here at a high level. Obviously, the services themselves have a lot more detail about some of the lessons that they have learned, but we've very much tried to keep this at a strategic level for you to consider. So I think that's probably all I want to say. I'll present the report as it is, and happy to try and take any questions.
Thanks, Alison. I will open it up. I see John Cook's hands up. John.
Thanks, Luann, and thanks, Alison, for the report. First thing to say is totally agree with comment on page 264 that the staff response has been exceptional. So I think we should recognise that. The other thing that struck me when reading this paper was the comments on page 264, 265 about the toll on staff health and well-being, and that made complete sense to me on the sense that you can sprint for short periods, you can work flat out for short periods. If you're working flat out for month after month after month, at some point you're going to hit a brick wall and become totally ineffective. And it's funny because I was reading the paper over the weekend and did some Googling, and actually we've seen the same picture in Canada and Singapore and Egypt and wherever, so it's not a surprise. But the thing that occurred to me, and it's good that we're saying health and well-being should be a priority. It's good that we're developing a dashboard, but it just struck me in the recommendations that if we get a significant number of staff suffering from stress or anxiety or depression, that could have a really serious impact on the organisation and on the services we deliver. So not just on the staff themselves, although that's important, obviously, but on the people that we serve. So I just kind of want to just throw this out as an idea. Rather than just waiting to have an annual report back in March next year, could we have this as maybe a standing item on each IJB meeting, just as a quick update on staff health and well-being? Because it strikes me if it all goes horribly wrong, that's just going to impact on everything else. So I just wondered if we could be, and I say it's not a criticism of anything that's in the report because it's a good report, but this is the issue that worries me more, actually more than anything that's on the strategic risk register, to be honest. So yeah, just a thought.
Thanks, John, and yeah, absolutely. Please be assured that we won't be waiting till a year and coming forward. Then monitoring it and coming forward. It's something that we've been monitoring very closely throughout the pandemic, and that monitoring is ongoing. happy to bring forward, maybe as part of the Chief Officer report every time we could maybe just give you a little bit of update as to what's been happening, you know, and what we're doing about it. Sandy's just popped up on my screen, so I don't know if Sandy wants to input in. Sandy is our wellbeing guru, so I don't know if Sandy wants to say anything, or if to add to that.
Thank you. Is that okay, Chair, if I just come in?
Please do, Sandy. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Just a couple of points then, maybe. One would be, we have just started, I'm very conscious of the excellent point made by the member there, that we've just restarted and remobilised our Healthy Working Lives group, conscious of the challenges that people have faced. And I think probably at the next meeting, if the committee wished to see that, I could bring forward the most recent quarterly sickness absence and cause of sickness absence information. We only get that quarterly, but if the board were inclined, I could bring that and include it in either a report separately or as part of Chief Officer's report. So we could provide that information to the next meeting should people wish to see that, Chair.
I mean, I'd certainly find that a welcome thing, and I wasn't actually even thinking that we need to have war and peace length thing on these unless there's something going wrong where we do need to make an intervention. But yeah, regular updates I'd find really helpful.
Thanks, John, and thanks. I think Alison's suggestion is a good one. If we include that in the Chief Officer's report and just make sure that the headlines are covered, and the data Sandy is suggesting might be good to use in that. We also have the workforce strategy coming back to the IJB as a full report later this year. Now, I know that doesn't address the immediate concerns, but that will be, you know, the well-being of the workforce will be included in that report as well. But I think if we can add that as a recommendation, John, that we ask that in the Chief Officer's report there's regular high-level updates on that, if that seems okay. Thank you, John. Really good point. Really important that we've cited on that. A few hands up now, so I see Kim, and then I'll go to John Tomlinson.
Okay, thank you. I have a few points actually, but one really related to what John just said around that, because that was one of my concerns. The annual staff survey, was there one done last year? I can't recall, because I know it was an unusual year, but
there wasn't a full survey done, but there was a kind of brief temperature check taken. So we do have results from that.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask two different points actually. One on page 263 of our pack, around the sort of access to digital developments. It mentions in point 1 around, you know, there's a variety of options to meet individuals' needs and could do better to communicate the support. And I appreciate everything was done at pace and things, but it's really on reflection and kind of going forward. You know, in the position that I am with my other hat on, there seems to be a bit of general confusion from those that have done a survey, from those that I speak to around really what's going on now around accessing healthcare, and does it have to be near me? Can they actually go to the GP surgery? Are the doors open? And there's lots of, I think I wonder if there's work going on there around on what it's going to look like in the future, really, and making it clear for patients, because I think there's still quite a bit of unease and uncertainty as to what the situation is at the moment and then going forward. So I would assume there's work happening, but
yes, absolutely. That's part of the remobilisation discussions. So, you know, I think at the minute we're all still in that phase as you know, how can we move forward? You know, what is happening with COVID? Can we go back to face to face? So all of these discussions are ongoing. You know, we have done a bit of work in terms of readiness. You know, how are our services ready to mobilise? And part of that mobilisation discussion discussion will be, so how, you know, how does that look? You know, what will we offer? And your point about communication is absolutely valid. That's certainly one lesson that, as you say, we did transform at pace, and it was very much a reaction to the situation at the time. But you know, we're a little bit further on now. We know a little bit more about the virus and what we can and can't do. So as we are working through these remobilisation plans, that we will also work out around about. We're also having discussions around about how we use space, and you know, digitisation and the use of digitisation will feed into that. So absolutely, there will be options. We will do things in different ways, and we will communicate just exactly what will be available and how people can access services when we have that clarity.
So that's great. I think it's around that communication, because again, how do we communicate, and how do we, you know, we're still back to digital potentially, and it's those that just don't know, and they're not really, they're not on Facebook, they're not on social media, and how they find out that, you know, how they can access, because I think as every week goes past, there's missed opportunities for healthcare interventions. And I'm just worrying that that's just building and building. But I appreciate that there's work ongoing. And Luann, can I just ask one further question? It's not related to that, sorry. It was just around the long COVID thing, and I know I'm assuming that, you know, the direction is from government, because looking at the, you know, the surveys that's coming around those who have been hospitalised with COVID, it's just it seems that there's an awful lot more uncertainty around this, and maybe not so much interventions or plans going into long COVID. I don't know if it's maybe just the wording around this, but just some concerns. Just knowing personally, I know 3 people who've had long COVID, and none of them were admitted to hospital, so therefore they wouldn't be captured in that survey. But the long-term effects are huge, and I just wondered if there's more, or is it just kind of developing because we're still finding out about long COVID?
Yeah, it is a developing picture, but absolutely our focus would be on those with long COVID in the community, not necessarily just those who had been hospitalised. But you know, there's a lot of discussions around about how we get that information, how we reach those people, you know, and indeed what the implications might be for our services. So very early days in terms of what that picture looks like. I think we just wanted to put a marker down, the flag that, you know, we were absolutely aware of it, and we know it's something that we need to consider. So, you know, we will be keeping an eye out on any of the modelling that's done and any of the communications from the Scottish Government in terms of, you know, what we should be doing in that respect.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, Kim. John Tomlinson, and then Sarah Duncan.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I found this a very good overview, very helpful to reflect on and to see how you know, the team have been reflecting. It prompts a lot of things, and we could be here a long time just on this report. So I'll just raise a few points, but perhaps this and the follow-up work that John's signalled can be part of a workshop at some point in the future, because I think it does signal ways in which the kind of framework that we are looking at is evolving and will change. So I just wanted to suggest that in future updates, it would be interesting to see any lessons around the public view around self-management and the opportunity to shift that, because that's quite a fundamental challenge for us. And that would be interesting to hear about that in the future. Reflecting on John's point, just maybe building on that, Councillor Cook's point a little bit more. I'm conscious that the kind of change curve information that's out there, King's Fund and others, is quite helpful, because it avoids the idea of it being a linear process and that it's very different for different people, and that's not good or bad. It's just how people have responded and what they've actually experienced. And I think that's a helpful link into being able to look at the recovery alongside the remobilisation, and be able to assure ourselves on the timing of that, if you like. So it's just to suggest that as this evolves, and as we go into more cross-system working, it might be that some of the frameworks can be brought across. So, you know, I'm aware of response, you know, ongoing response to pandemic, recovery of the teams and the services, the remobilisation, and then the renewal. And that's quite a simple framework. And if that's replicated, it will help us when we look across these pathways that straddle across different parts of the system. So it's just some observations in reading it. I found it really helpful, and it did help reflection.
Thank you, John. And I think all noted for the moment, and probably just stuff that we need to come back to, but really helpful to get that feedback from you. Sarah. Sticky button, Sarah, I think, yeah.
Button, Sarah, yes, I'm here now. Actually, I'm reflecting on what I've just heard from John, and my comment on this is, I hope it was a useful, reflective piece of work for people to do, to kind of distill some of the experiences and impressions that everybody had from the last 15 months working through it. My sense is that I wouldn't find it helpful to keep reporting on what we've learned from lessons from COVID, because actually it's reset the baseline for an awful lot of what we do in health and care, and actually just making sure that the lessons that we've learned have actions that flow from them, and those actions are incorporated in the thinking that you're about to do on your new strategic plan. So actually, if you like, mainstreaming this learning now and not treating it as something separate that has arisen because of the pandemic. Of course it's arisen from the pandemic, but what's important now is what we do about what we've learned. And actually the way to take that forward is through all the work on the strategic plan and the pathways and all the developments that will flow out of that. I think there are I think there's an exception to that though, which worries me a bit, which is this whole issue that Kim raised about long COVID and what we do about patients who have long COVID. I'm aware, I know one of the campaigners who is very distressed that there is a specific long COVID service in NHS England, but there isn't in Scotland. And there's a big campaign around that. And I'm seeing a bit of disparity of treatment here in the report itself, and it's talking about the mental health response for people who've been hospitalised with COVID. And it appears from the report that they're going to get fast access to mental health support. But actually, we're not doing anything specific for long COVID patients. And I worry, first of all, about the disparity of treatment for somebody that's been hospitalised with COVID versus somebody that's had very similar intensive care experience because of an accident or a stroke or something. Why pick on COVID patients? Why aren't we offering mental health direct fast access for everybody who's been hospitalized for trauma? I mean, I'm sure there's resource reasons for it, but I'm not sure that actually offering a specific bespoke service to everybody who's been hospitalized with COVID is fair. And there just does seem to be this contradiction between what we're doing about people with long COVID and what we're doing about people who've been hospitalized with COVID. And I'd like people to think about whether we need to do something about that. Actually. Sorry, that was very rambling. Sorry.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm wondering if we should slightly change the recommendations to capture this the conversations we've had, but we'll come to that at the end. I think I see a hand up. Is that Leslie's hand up? Leslie, yes, come in. Oh, sticky button, Leslie, we're not hearing you.
There we are this time, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it was, I suppose it's kind of echoing a little bit of what Sarah's saying there in terms of that it's about it kind of chimes back in terms of, you know, like the human right about the fundamental right to life, and that some of the COVID deaths, you know, like a substantial amount of the COVID deaths, I think it's something like 30% in care homes, you know, may in part have resulted from, you know, people coming from hospital into care homes and vice versa. And that, I don't expect people to necessarily go into that in the report, but it's not clear to me in the way that, you know, when HIV first appeared, there was a whole set of things just automatically started to be done. I'm aware, obviously, there's been a whole lot of practice developed out of, you know, people being COVID positive and what that then means in a care home and transmission. So I suppose it's just like I'm looking for some assurance around that, that if we, you know, that as we go on, you know, that tragedy, if you like, of those, you know, people who died early in care homes, if we're going to face future pandemics, isn't going to be repeated.
Thanks, Leslie. I don't know who wants to come back on that. That's obviously a huge topic. Sandra.
Yeah, just to pick up, Chair, I think it is exactly as you say, a huge topic. I think what Councillor Dunbar and Sarah are raising are really relevant points. But I think as we are progressing and moving forward through the impact and the fallout, if you like, from COVID, that we're continually working with different avenues and supporting different ways forward. The information regarding that, specifically about the care homes, we have fulfilled and aligned, and I think the IJB's had several reports at different areas highlighting that we have followed Scottish guidance, Scottish Government guidance. We've followed those reports, and there has been information that's there. We've discussed before about you know, whether we're at higher or lower in death rates and things, and I'm not really sure that would be appropriate for us to bring in a public forum, because we have reported on that and we do have our TURAS, but obviously we're aware of the identifiable. The other area with regards to the long COVID, there are certain areas, there's bits and pieces of work, well, not bits and pieces, there are short life working groups that are underway relating to COVID, particularly some of the work you're describing is round about the COSIT report, which was fundamentally based on people who were in ITU and coming out with COVID, and there's work around there. But there's also a huge piece that's undergoing and has came out last year and has been reinforced this year on regarding rehabilitation and long stay rehab. So I suppose just to give assurance that these are all areas that are becoming, just as our position has been reset, we're taking cognizance of these, and you will see these starting to be built in and moving forward as we're progressing. But fundamentally, we will do. I think if anything else, the lessons learned shows that we're constantly, as you would expect from your exec team, we're constantly learning, we're agile, and we're reflecting on what comes forward so that we can help that shape our decision making for the future and help inform and work with the IJB to make sure our plan and strategic plans reflect that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I think that does provide assurance.
Thank you. I see Angela Scott.
Thanks, Luann. And just to add to Sandra's comments in response to Councillor Dunbar's questions, important to remember, of course, that Gold Command on the pandemic sat with Scottish Government. And so again, colleagues at a local level were following the instructions from Gold Command. And I think there'll be a proper process from Gold Command in terms of the fundamental reviews. I think some of the points that Councillor Dunbar was raising, and of course Scottish Government in the context of UK Government doing its own review. So I think that colleagues in the paper they've brought forward today are reflecting what was within the control and influence at a local level. But I think some of the points that Councillor Dunbar are for those layers of government above us as part of their lessons learned and the inevitable public inquiry that will follow all of that. So I think just important to recognise that the actions at a local level were directed by Gold Command that took place at a national level.
Thanks, Angela. Okay, I don't see any more hands up, so I'll move on to recommendations. And I'm thinking maybe, I wonder if we should add one that's just saying that noting the themes from this discussion for further consideration at an appropriate point by the IJB. And I suppose I'm thinking that because it may be relevant for some things to go to clinical care governance, other to go to RAP, some to come here. So the themes that I've got noted are the query, the point about digital and what's the longer term use of digital going to be. There's also the public communication around the changes that are happening now and the clarity of message for the public. There's the long COVID and what's been done around supporting people from who've had different experiences of long COVID. There's the query about whether there's a public shift in terms of self-management, was something that I think would be relevant for us to consider how we look at. And then obviously the bigger point about staff well-being. So I would suggest we maybe add another recommendation just to note those themes, and obviously recommend that we note the content of the report and the ongoing activity. And I wonder, and Alison, I'll take your thoughts on this, but the recommendation B at the moment says instructs the Chief Officer to provide an update on progress on embedding these lessons to the Clinical Care Governance Committee. I wonder if Sarah's point is more helpful, that we look to get these lessons embedded into our strategic planning for the future, because we don't want to be creating just extra reports. But is that more useful, Alison, from your perspective?
Yes, that's helpful, Luann. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll change that second one to be to look at embedding that in our strategic planning, and we'll add a recommendation around receiving a regular update to the IJB on staff wellbeing over the next period, and that can be Chief Officer report, or if there's a specific report, then it can be done whichever's most appropriate. But the extra one in addition to that is noting the themes that we may wish as an IJB to consider further, and those are the points that I'd said at the start about digital communication, long COVID, self-management, and staff well-being, I think, are the main ones. And we can have a discussion offline about how best to take them and where to have a look at those. Does that seem okay for people? Alison, you okay with that? Yeah, and IJB members happy with that? But clearly a very helpful report to get us all reflecting and thinking about how we go forward from now. So thank you for providing that for us, Alison. Most appreciated and useful. Okay, I will now move on to
Chair, can
yes.
I just clarify your
Sure.
additional themes direction? Just to note the themes discussed as you've highlighted during this discussion, and instruct the Chief Officer to consider appropriate reporting to appropriate committees or board and committees as we move forward.
Yes, it may not be committees, it may be seminars, so just
yeah,
to make
or appropriate reporting. Yeah,
that's fine. Thank you, Derek. Okay, so we'll move on now to item 16, which is the Fast Track Cities paper. Do we have Elaine McConaughey with us for this one? Elaine, there you are. Hello.
Hello, thanks. Myself and Danielle are here to speak to the paper. So thank you, Chair. The paper intends to give an update on the progress with regards Fast Track Cities. The IJB endorsed the High Level Action Plan in January 2020, and the Lord Provost formally signed the Charter the following month in February last year. So the paper intends to provide an update on the progress over the last 12 months, set very much within the context of COVID and the challenge that that's brought. And what we're asking is the IJB to note progress on the action plan and endorse the proposed actions going forward. So I don't know, Daniela, do you want to highlight any key points?
Yeah, thank you for inviting us along to present the paper. Yes, I think we've presented before, and I think the IJB is aware of the high level outcomes that we're trying to achieve, which is zero transmissions and zero stigma and zero deaths from HIV. There has been some challenges over the last 12 months, as I'm sure everybody is aware, which has mostly impacted on our testing capacity. So that is our short-term aim, is to try and really push testing capacity despite the challenges with capacity within staffing and laboratory capacity, and look at other ways of working. And we also have a real push on looking at stigma and how we can address stigma, particularly in the short term.
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks, Elaine. I'll open that up now to questions from IJB members. I'm not seeing hands up. Daniela and Elaine, I would say, oh, John Tomlinson's put his hand up, and then John Cook. Sorry. John Tomlinson first, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report. One of the aspects that I was looking at there was the increased prevalence, if that's the right word, in certain areas of disadvantage. And so I'm quite interested in whether the approach to that from a public health point of view is on that one issue, or whether that gets joined up with other public health issues when we're trying to interface with the public and change attitudes or behaviours around some of these things.
Shall I come in, Elaine? Yeah, thank you for your question. I think the deprivation data that we presented at the report was around PrEP uptake, so that's a prevention drug for HIV, and we know that the uptake of that drug in more deprived areas is lower than in areas of less deprivation. In terms of HIV prevalence data, we don't, it's a bit more, because the level of HIV diagnoses are relatively low, we don't have that kind of information drilling down to deprivation across Grampian, although we could generate that. I suppose in terms of your question around how we address disadvantage or deprivation as a whole in terms of public health outcomes, we've tried as much as possible to, although we're working within our area, which is, although it's HIV we're presenting today, that usually works within our wider MCN around sexual health and wider bloodborne viruses. We do try and look at ways of working. So for example, we've looked at whether vaccine clinics, pop-up clinics in more deprived areas could also offer bloodborne virus HIV testing, for example. So we're trying to address things as much as possible, because we do understand that there is obviously staffing and capacity issues across the system, particularly pre-COVID, but also particularly post-COVID. So how can we do things where one opportunity counts and we can impact on those public health outcomes for that one person in multiple ways?
Okay, thank you for that. It is an area that I'm quite interested in, and we've got another report coming up around vaccinations, and I've heard reports around test and protect, which are all sort of individual projects going into the same areas and people. Something that we can maybe come back to as an IJB at another point, but thanks for your answer.
Thanks. John Cook.
Yeah, actually that bit of discussion has largely answered what I was going to talk about, which was, and not to contradict Sarah Duncan's very good point on the last paper, but I was wondering if there are any learnings from test and protect on the COVID that could be factored into HIV treatment.
Is this for myself? Sorry, this question. Oh, sorry.
I think Daniela or Elaine, whichever.
I mean, I'm not involved in test and protect per se, but I suppose one of the things is perhaps around is exactly as the previous question said, that if there's communities or particular priority groups that we feel have multiple public health priorities, then how can we work together to sort of address that at the same time, potentially using the same staff or potentially services working together, and looking at where they can share work for those particular at-risk groups.
And I see Susan Webb has just appeared. Hello, Susan. Do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important point. I think there are a number of elements, whether it's test and protect, and the calls we've made have captured a huge amount of data that helps inform how services may respond moving forward. The vaccination paper that we're just about to move on to, again, talks about the work of gaining insights from our communities as the things that could support individuals to either change behaviours or take up services that are on offer. So as we move forward, one of the proposals is around this whole place and well-being. So taking that locality focus, we've got teams working there, and how we dovetail that with some of the more specialist services, such as the ones that Daniela and Elaine have outlined today.
Thanks, Susan. John, are you happy with any further comments? Does that cover?
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Elaine, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just coming to say, I suppose there's an opportunity as well around the development of our locality empowerment groups and the work that we're doing at the moment in terms of identifying our priorities, and very much what Susan said in terms of taking that locality approach, and also kind of identifying what that looks like moving forward. So I think there's real opportunity with these locality plans that we'll hope to bring to the IJB in July for endorsement.
Thanks, Elaine. Yes, it's good to see different areas coming together and focusing around communities. That's absolutely seems very sensible. So thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands up. So we will go to the recommendations. And I should say, Elaine and Daniela, this has been a very packed agenda for the IJB today. So we see this in the work that you've been doing as hugely important. That there may have been more questions on other days when the agenda hasn't maybe been so packed. But we wanted this to be visible and on the agenda for the IJB. So please be assured that we are absolutely, supportive of fast track cities and continue to be so. So if we go to recommendations, the first one for the IJB is to consider the fast track high level plan at Appendix A and note the progress on the action plan. Second one is to endorse the proposed actions for 21-22, noting the action plan as a live document, and instruct the Chief Officer to provide an update on progress to the IJB on 29th of March 2022. So I'm seeing nodding heads, so people are happy and content to approve that. I would also want to just add one, and that would be, and if people are agreeable, to really commend the Fast Track Cities group for their continual focus on this during COVID, and to acknowledge the huge achievement of exceeding the 90 targets during 2020. So just to put on record our acknowledgement of that and our appreciation of that for the teams. So thank you. Okay, so thank you, Daniela and Elaine, much appreciated. We'll look forward to future reports. Okay, so we'll now move on to item 17, the vaccinations paper. I see we have Susan Webb with us. Did I see David Flegger as well, or is it yourself, Susan?
Yes, no, I'm here with the team today. David and Joe, who's just taken up the programme manager role, Sandy and Caroline from the local team. So if it's okay with you, I'll just say a few words of introduction and then happy to answer any questions. And I appreciate you've got a really busy agenda, so thank you very much for making the time for us to give you an update. I would like to use the opportunity to thank everyone who's been involved in the planning and delivery of the largest vaccination programme in peacetime. It's been absolutely phenomenal, but also to thank the people living in Aberdeen City for their excellent response and encouragement for the team. It's been hugely appreciated. So vaccines are a really critical part of suppressing the virus to the lowest possible level. It saves lives, it reduces health and care demand, But also, I think at the stage we're at now, it's also allowing us to ease restrictions and to look forward to returning back to normal, whatever that might be, life. So it's critically important. But when we started the process, our first phase of the programme was to vaccinate as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, and as safely as possible. And the team considered a range of options as how best to do that. So in phase 1, we delivered essentially 185,000 vaccinations, huge when you think about the scale, through GPs for the over 80s, through district nursing, for care homes and for housebound, and the majority through the mass vaccination centre at TECA. The cohorts 1 to 7, the uptake in Aberdeen City is between 98.5 and 100%, so phenomenal. And those are the cohorts that we've gone back to remind them of their the invite if they didn't take it up the first time round. But clearly we still work ongoing for the cohorts 8 to 12, so the under 60s to age 18 years of age. And within the second phase, we've looked at what we've called an inclusivity plan. So those who didn't take up the invite the first time round. And the first stage that the team did was undertake analysis of our data sets, and we identified 8 areas with lower uptake. Uptake is still remarkable at 73 to 83%, but we want as many people as possible to take up the offer. As I've just mentioned, having understood where the uptake or the cold spots was lower, we worked with a range of community groups, individuals working in the areas, to gain insights as to what are the barriers to taking up the offer. And it's not surprising that there were many reasons as to why people hadn't come forward. There was movement in and out of the city, so a number of individuals have left. There were some that had missed appointments and didn't know how to rebook. There were some that weren't aware of the support that was available to them to get out to TECA, and there were some that had other health conditions that made them worry, so a vaccine hesitancy. So we've put a robust plan in place that has been commended, and there's been a number of early successes. We've got pop-up clinics that have been very successful, a range of partners supporting us with that. We've been working with community leaders, we've been working with church leaders, we've been working with the Black and minority ethnic leaders to understand, to encourage communities to take up the offer. We're also aware, though, that some of the vaccine hesitancy is due to there's quite confusing information that is out in the media. So we've got a website, we've got social media, and we've got a phone line and your healthcare provider that's happy to talk through any individual concerns that may be. So that's just by way of introduction. Really happy to answer any questions that members might have as a result of the papers before them. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for that comprehensive introduction. I see Philip's hand up. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. An interesting paper, thank you. Now, I'm presuming that this is actually related to first-time vaccinations only. So in the news, that's correct, isn't it? Or, so the recent news that we've all been hearing is that the take-up for second vaccinations has been relatively low, and that clearly will have a big impact on the efficacy of the vaccines. Can you comment on that, please, and what some information you're getting to actually really inform people why, you know, the second vaccination has actually been shunned? Thank you.
Yeah, so actually we've had really good uptake of our second dose of vaccine. those appointments that have been missed are in the region of about 4.9%, but actually some of those are appointments that just weren't suitable for individuals, but they hadn't taken the opportunity to let us know, and there'll be a lot of reasons behind that. So all of that is being followed up. So actually within our area, uptake of the second dose is really important. And you're absolutely right. The first dose provides us protection, but the evidence around some of the new variants, one described as the Indian variant for ease rather than the technical term, having the second dose gives far greater protection, which is why we are looking to deliver the second dose within an 8-week gap. So lots of work going on, but the uptake has been really good in terms of the second dose. Thanks.
Thank you. That is interesting, because the reports are there's something like at most 50% uptake. So clearly that's wrong. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Philip. John Cook.
Thanks, Luann. Yeah, just a couple of points. A comment first rather than a question. Recommendation 2.3 says we must promote the need for the vaccination. I've had my letter and I'm going for my second JAG this week. So just to let you know on that. And the other question, thanks for the information you were highlighting about Susan, about the pop-ups, which I think you've done a really good job on that. It's a slight question. Anything specific on the Gypsy Traveller community? I mean, relatively small in Aberdeen because we only have the one site out at Clinity, but I wondered if there was any information on that.
There is, and I see Jo popped her hand up really quickly. Jo, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll cover that one. So we've got very good, strong links with the Gypsy Liaison Traveller Officer within the council, Amanda. So she has good relationships with the camp, obviously, at Clinity. We proactively went to them actually early on and offered them an accelerated vaccine, because we were aware that as soon as restrictions perhaps lifted, they may move on from Aberdeen. They were quite happy to wait their time for their appointment to come through and would travel back to Aberdeen if their appointment came through, and Amanda links very closely with them in terms of getting their letters and mails to them. So that kind of covered the Clinity camp. The temporary encampments, again, we worked with the Gypsy Liaison officers, and she visited every camp when they arrived, and that was one of her questions when they were arriving within the city: have you had the vaccine? And so I'm fairly confident that we're on it, in terms of we've got a plan in place, and we've got strong links with the Gypsy Liaison Travelling Officer to make sure that we're picking up anybody that are moving into the city, into kind of temporary encampments. Does that help?
That helped enormously. A very comprehensive and helpful answer, so thank you.
No problems.
Thank you, Jo. Sarah Duncan, and then Mike.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd just like to praise the action plan. It's incredibly impressive. It's very comprehensive, and it's really good to see a community asset-based approach being taken to tackling this problem. So I can't praise it highly enough. Actually, it's one of the most impressive things I've seen since I've been on the IJB. So my thanks to everybody on the team who did it. I think the reason that this is so important is because the cold spots are your perfect illustration of the health inequalities issue that we're trying to tackle, because they're the parts of the city and the groups of the city that we know suffer from health inequalities across the piece, not just in terms of being able to access the vaccine. So this is a good model for how we engage with these groups in the future about other health-related issues, I think, and other well-being issues. A couple of specific questions on the information that's been provided. So in table 1, we've got the number that needs, that's on page 12 of the report. We've got the number of people remaining to be vaccinated to take the levels up to 90% in the cold spots. But then we hear later on in the report that a large number of people have actually moved away from the city. are those numbers, so 153 people in George Street Harbour, is that before we did the telephoning and realised that people had moved away? And do those numbers remaining to be vaccinated need to come down to take account of people who've moved away?
I see Joe's hands up. Joe, do you want to
Yeah,
come in on that specific?
yes. So just on those numbers, that was the numbers prior to the phone calls to those that didn't attend their appointments. So that was the information, that's the data prior to any contacts. So what we have been doing over the last week, and we don't have all the information available to us, but been looking at empty properties within the city and can pull that information by some of these data zones. So we're looking to see if there's any synergies between the cold spots in the city and the potential empty properties in the city, because that obviously might help support some of the thinking and the support that's required in terms of the targeting that we require.
Okay, no, that's good. That's a sensible use of data, isn't it, and saves some effort. My second question is about non-attendance. So that's the table on page 20, where we've got these 100 people who have said that they're opting out of the programme. And it says that they're going to continue to get letters generated nationally. Is that the only follow-up and persuasion that's going to be done on those people? Or are they going to be contacted again personally later on?
I saw Sandy's hand pop up. Were you wanting to cover that, Sandy?
Thank you. Thank you. The short answer is we will also be phoning them.
Okay.
Contact centre. It does bring into kind of the focus. We then get feedback from people saying, stop writing to us nationally twice, stop phoning us, stop coercing us. If we wanted this, we would just come and get it, kind of thing. So that's the sort of challenge. So in anticipation of people, particularly elected members, hearing those kind of things in future, that's one of the challenges of the process. But we continue to phone them. We're going to have clinics in their areas and continue to try to do that. But many of them will say, stop, we don't need to you don't need to keep asking us, but we're going to keep asking them anyway.
I wonder if that's where we need to start using peers, people people who live in their community, people who are from backgrounds similar to them, who might have been vaccine hesitant, and talk about their experiences and do that. Because I've spoken to people in my ward who are adamant they're not getting it, and they're just believing the rubbish they see on Facebook. So we need to be putting the facts out on the channels that they're getting the rubbish from, but actually from people who they'll listen to. And actually, in most cases, I suspect they're not health professionals that they're going to listen to. It's people like them. So that would be my observation on that. And my final question, Chair, sorry, you've been very indulgent of me keeping coming back, but it's about the continued use of pop-up clinics. So they were incredibly popular, very successful. Are they going to be a feature for second doses of people from these areas as well? What's the plan for continuing pop-up clinics?
Can I come in there? So just to confirm about the community clinics, so we've got dates booked in for second doses, so where we've had clinics at Tillydrone and Gerrard Street and Seaton and various other locations, there will be a second date 8 weeks after to pick up on those people to book in for their second doses. They will have the opportunity to book into various locations if they don't want to go back to that original location, but we've got dates booked in right through till August. In addition to some of the areas that we've been focusing on, we're also going to visit places, Concorth Church and Balnagas Community Centre as well, just to sort of increase our availability in locations throughout the city. And just to come back on what you were speaking about earlier, just about peers, we've got SHMU that are going to be undertaking some interviews with people that have attended at P&J from local communities, or people that have attended at their local clinics, just to do some interviews and start to promote that bit further.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I see Sandy has his hand up. Sandy, was there something you wanted to come back on from
just to
Sarah's
add to
questions?
If I could, just to add to the pop-up information Caroline's given, I'm determined we're going to get a bus and we're going to drive that bus around the city till the end. So we're very hopeful that we can get a bus in the next 2 or 3 weeks that kind of pop up anywhere and everywhere. We will continue to be using a big success has been our targeted social media campaign, where messages pop up in the streets or the neighbourhoods of those people that are in the cold spot areas, and we're getting our confidence up and probably going to be punchier and kind of more direct to those adverts. And some of you have probably seen we've sort of taken over the road signs as well in the city, so we're going to try and again be a bit more punchy and say you do need to come and get your vaccine if you want to go back to whatever A, B and C. So we will be continuing all of those things as well as the work that Caroline outlined.
Thanks, Sandy. Really comprehensive. We'll move on now to Mike Adams, and then Alison Murray also has her hand up. Mike.
Yeah, first off, I have to say the work that's been put in by the folk behind this is Sandy and co, and it's only because I ken the other names, and how flexible they've been and how it's changed along the bit to react to that is number one, teen a lot of work, and number two, I think has been pretty successful. So anecdotally, and it's eye candy at this moment and feeding back, and it might explain some of the numbers. There has been some anecdotal stuff that the difficulty cancelling and non-suitable appointment and rescheduling. So there apparently has been some issue with that, and the phone line, of course, is kind of like absolutely chock-a-block. So that also can cause a little bit. And then several people I know, including my youngest son, got his letter 2 days after he set off for Brunei for 2 months. So the oil workers are starting to move again. So there could be a bit for trying to do the catch up with that. It's going to be a little bit slow. So some of that might be the answer on some of the no shows, etc. So it's as I say, it's just worth bearing in mind. Some folk are finding it difficult to reschedule suitable appointments.
Thanks, Mike, for that feedback. We'll move to Alison Murray and then John Tomlinson.
Hi, yes, thanks. Yes, I've heard similar to Mike in terms of anecdote and also letters arriving a little late. But my main query was, I noticed the cities as a whole have lower vaccination figures than the countryside. Is there a sort of reason why? Well, there obviously is a reason why, but I was wondering what the reason was for that difference. And also, do you think that it's going to become more difficult to persuade people as the numbers of COVID drop away, as people perhaps don't see the urgency anymore to have the vaccines?
Thanks, Alison. So city versus rural is your first question, and whether the lower prevalence has an impact on uptake. Your two questions. Yeah.
Oh, Jo, do you want to come back?
No, I'll let you cover it, Susan.
Okay, thank you. I think the challenge in terms of the city, it absolutely, we are seeing this. There are many potential explanations why this may be so. However, I don't think we've said it's X or it's Y. But what I would say is within the major cities, there tend to be universities, cities, and you do see populations moving back and forth. So you've just given an example of oil and gas. Students are another population, older students that are coming and going, families coming and going with them. So there's quite a lot of reason why. Also, pockets of deprivation tend to be in the city as well, and just getting time off work to come to appointments again has been something that has been flagged up as a potential barrier. And so one of our areas for our inclusivity plan is around individuals, us taking our pop-up clinics to some of the workplaces where it may be harder for individuals to come for their appointments. Language as well, literacy issues are also reasons that are more predominant within cities than there are within the rural communities, and therefore would have a bigger impact at that population level. In terms of numbers drop away and risk, absolutely. I think one of the things that we do need to do is just explain the impact of, say, one case in terms of the numbers of contacts that then need to isolate, the impacts of the difference between rates of hospital admission for those vaccinated and unvaccinated as we go and as we get more evidence and data. So I think for us, the issue is taking the science as it evolves, because this is all still very new, and being able to explain to our population why it is important and why we are aiming for that 100% coverage for the eligible elements of our population. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay, John Tomlinson.
Thanks, Luan. Just a quick comment. I think what this conversation highlights is that we've got a very solid and strong response in the immediate term, and we've put in the resources for that. But the conversation and the consideration of this highlights that earlier point that's been raised about our public health response in these areas, and what we don't want to do following the current period is to just simply have responses when needed. I think we do need to be thinking about the prevention side and a different approach, and what investment might be needed, in the sense that investment might actually save a lot of money in the future, and that's including staff resource. You know, our workforce is under pressure as well. So I think this is something that we would want to return to. And so it was really just to highlight that, and perhaps I can speak to the chair of the endowments committee that funds some research, and that maybe there's some qualitative research that can be done fairly quickly on this, because I think it's a live case study that perhaps we can get around to pull out some lessons on that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I think the endowment chair would be interested in that conversation. Okay, I see. Well, I also want to note in the chat Maggie Hepburn's comment about a question about, is there anything ACFO can do to help get the message out to the cold spots and encouraging folk to get in touch. So a real offer there from Maggie, and ACFO do have a huge network of third sector. Maggie, do you want to come in and say any more on that?
I just, I'm conscious of the enormous work that's already been done, and the report is so comprehensive, and hats off to everybody, and a huge appreciation from ourselves at ACFO, and also personally from myself, for the amount of work that's been done around this already. And I went through these sort of categories, and there's such a lot of fabulous work already been identified, and the correct sort of reach that, you know, we would have suggested as well, with using the football club and using, you know, the support groups that people already use. It was just if there was anything else in terms of local community activists that we might be able to identify. I'll take the report back to the team and ask for any suggestions from the team, and come back to you if there's anything else that people come up with. I wonder whether it might be worthwhile, just, I know other people have mentioned it, keeping it going in terms of the stories. I know some people have mentioned the stories about, you know, people telling their tale, or people telling their tale about why, or why, you know, these sorts of things do tend to touch people more than the phone calls. And I appreciate what Sandy was saying. It must be very disheartening for people calling when people are saying, please go away. And you know, it's really hard for the people on the other end of the phone. So it was just really to offer support, and we will take it back to the team, and we'll have a look, and if there's anything that we can think of, we'll come back to you.
Thanks, Maggie. That's hugely appreciated, and I would say ACFO real experience in digital storytelling as well, so could be a resource there to be used if we're wanting to get those lived experience stories out there. So thank you. Sandy, your hand's up.
Thank you, Chair, but I think is Elaine McConaughey's hand up? She might want to come in. I'm not seeing all the hands. I'll come in then. I was just going to pick up a couple of points just now about the medium term, and also how do we impact on beyond COVID vaccine, just to kind of give early sight to board members. We are very actively trying to buy a big shop in Aberdeen city centre, or rent one to be more accurate. Rent one either in the Bonaccord Centre or the Trinity Centre, or potentially at Berry Den, Cornhill, and that would probably be a medium-term 1 to 3 years immunisation centre. Now, immediately that then allows us to have synergies about other parts of the immunisation campaign that Fiona Mitchell-Hill and her team will need to do over the next 1 to 3 years. So that hopefully that will help the city centre question, if you like, but also helps build a long-term connection. So what we're hoping is that some of the work that we're doing with the various groups, so say the BAME group that Caroline's done a lot of work leading with the BAME group, we hope we've built their confidence to come for other vaccinations and other health interventions. In the same way we've been linking to the Chinese community, the lady before me today, and again that's a kind of longer term connection. So we're hoping by bringing some of those things together, the longer term benefits beyond the COVID vaccine world will be longer term for some of those groups that are not necessarily taking up all those opportunities at the moment.
Thanks, Sandy. That's really helpful to hear. And just to note as well that we do have vaccinations blueprint report coming to the IJB in July. So hopefully that'll pick up some of that longer term planning, but that's excellent to hear. John Tomlinson, your hand's still up. Is there something, an additional question you want to come in with? No. Okay. Right, I will go on to the recommendations for approval, and if you can put your hand up if you're not in agreement, but I'll just read through them all so we're clear. So we're recommending the IJB notes the update provided by the Director of Public Health, NHS Grampian, on the delivery of the COVID vaccination programme as outlined in Appendix A. 2.2, I would say we want to commend the action plan as opposed to just noting it, because I think we've heard really strongly from everyone how impressive it is. So we commend the action plan in Appendix B, which details locality-based activity to address cold spots and vaccine update. 2.3, we request that IJB members continue to support the programme by raising awareness of the importance of the COVID vaccinations to protect the health of our population and support opening up the economy. This can be carried out by sharing key messages from the weekly programme updates with relevant networks and a range of other activities offline too. 2.4, to instruct officers to provide an update to the next IJB meeting on progress and improving uptake in areas identified. And I've suggested a final one just to put on record our thanks to all the staff involved in leading this, but also in the delivery of this evolving programme of vaccinations from the IJB. So thank you all very much. And I'm seeing people are agreeing with that, and we've even got a round of applause. So that's great. Thank you, Joe and Susan.
Chair.
And Caroline.
Chair.
Yes.
I noticed Jessica's got her hand up. I suspect it's to modify one of the.
I'm sorry, Jessica, I didn't see you there. Come in.
Don't worry at all. Yes, Chair, it's just to slightly amend recommendation 2.4, just to say that it should say instruct the Chief Officer to provide an update back to next IJB. Thank you.
As opposed to officers, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Jess. Didn't spot that. Thank you. Okay, that was a really great discussion, and yeah, really good to hear that progress. So we'll now move on to our next item on the agenda, and our vaccination colleagues can depart. Nice to see you all. So our next item, item 18, is commissioned day services and day activities, the Stay Well, Stay Connected agenda. Is it Anne Mackenzie introducing this paper for us today?
Yeah, it is.
Anne, hi.
Hopefully you can see and hear me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Luann. As you've just said, this paper really was requested as an update paper for the board on progress against the redesign of odd day opportunities and daycare services, now known as Stay Well, Stay Connected. You'll see in the recommendations that I've suggested that we bring a further update report to the board in December 2021. The paper outlines or takes us through our progress against the implementation plan, but I suppose just to reassure the board members that where people have presented themselves in need of care and support, where our day or where they would have previously received day support through some of our services, it's just to reassure people that those people who've approached us on have been considered on a case-by-case basis, and people's needs are continuing to be met through a variety of different means. We also understand from the data provided by Quarries, our carer support services, that people continue to present themselves when they need support. And we've also taken different opportunities to further promote the services of Quarries, both through connecting them through to Rosewell, but also as part of when carers were coming forward for vaccination, we managed to make links with the Techa Centre so that people became more aware of the services that organisation can offer. The plan that we had put in place and brought to you in October was an ambitious plan, and we at that time we couldn't have taken into account the most recent surge in the pandemic. But despite that fact, we have, I hope that you'll see from the paper, that we have managed to make progress despite that. I've just gone through the different parts of our implementation plan to give you an update. So if I take them in turn just very briefly, and if for some of them there is a further update since I wrote the paper. So for our planned residential respite, just to update you that we actually held a market engagement event on the 5th of May, which was well attended by providers. And we spoke to providers about our plans for the delivery of planned residential respite going forwards. We listened very hard to what they were saying to us, and we amended our recommendations, and a paper went back to the Executive Programme Board on Thursday last week and was approved. Since that time, over the last couple of days, we've been working on a communication that will go out to providers, we hope, over the next couple of days, which clearly outlines our plans based on their feedback, or taking their feedback into consideration, and starts to ask them to put themselves forward to come and work with us to deliver residential respite. We would anticipate, because of that market engagement event, that there will be a couple of weeks delay on the anticipated implementation date of planned residential respite. But I think it's important to get this right, and actually through that conversation with providers, other things were highlighted which we feel that can further improve the experience of people who are going into establishments for respite, and also for the people that care for them. In terms of buildings-based services, you'll see that we do have limited opportunity for people to attend a buildings-based day service, and slowly the capacity within those services, as people's confidence is starting to gain, and as we start to get clearer guidance on emerging out of lockdown, slowly we are starting to increase the numbers of places. We are starting this week to have more focused conversations on the future ambitions around this, what this might look like, and what alternative options might be for people who need support but don't want to go into a buildings-based service. And you'll notice in the appendix that we will be working very closely with the hospitality service that Quarries are pulling together, and hopefully we should have quite a seamless journey between what Quarries can offer through hospitality and the options that we are able to signpost people to who need these kinds of services. We did develop a market position statement, and you have the link to the document in the paper. It was a really good process to go through. It was a bit of a test for us. We've never really created a market position statement in that way. It was co-produced with providers and based on the feedback that the public had given to us. So I think it was a really helpful test, and has helped us gain some confidence as we go forward to create more market position statements as we proceed with our commissioning plans. Our enhanced community support huddles are now in a sustainable phase, and it's really important for the people around those discussions to ensure that they're aware of their community assets, their local community assets, and how they signpost people into those assets so that they can start to continue to be connected with their local community and regain their confidence to live an independent life. And finally, the prevention aspect, it's a really large work stream, and you'll notice from the appendix that we're doing quite a lot of testing, small testing, and what we really want to do is to focus on those small tests and actually start to make turn them into more sustainable and spreadable plans. It's really important, I think, that we work alongside in partnership with other people in this, because I think there's a risk that we could be duplicating effort from some of our partners. So it's really important that we focus on what it is that we're trying to achieve, and we look for opportunities to work alongside people and with people who are trying to achieve the same ambitions. I was just picking up on the previous report around the impact of COVID and the longer term impact of COVID. Some of the work that we're doing is really around enhancing physical activity, and some of that has come from reports of people who have been socially isolated and have been experiencing physical decline. So working with some of our sheltered housing colleagues, for example, delivering physical activity packs for people so that they can actually start to pick up their physical resilience and start to engage and become more connected with their local community. So hopefully that's a reasonable summary for people on our progress to date. It is a big work stream, but hopefully people will see that we are making suitable progress.
Thanks, Anne. And I would just say that I did click on the market position statement document, and it really is excellent and really easy to read and understand. And it helped bring this whole agenda to life for me. So I would encourage people, if they haven't looked at that, to go and have a read of the market position statement. So I'll open it up now to questions from IJB members. See Alison Murray's hand up. Alison.
Hi, yes, it was just to say I'm pleased to hear that more and more real world settings are opening up now, because I think that's one of the things that people have found difficult. I think online and virtual support or in-home support can only take you so far. So it's and I think people are more needing now to feel like they get back to normality. So I think it's great to hear that more spaces are being opened up. But again, as you say, some people are very nervous still about making use of that, particularly if they've got medical vulnerabilities as well. So yes, it was just to say good. Thank you.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I think the feedback is mixed as well. Some of the our providers have worked really creatively to provide opportunities in different ways, and for some people that has almost provided an extended level of support than they would have had previously. So it's just trying to get the balance right, isn't it, as we go forwards?
Indeed. John Tomlinson.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I don't really have a question on it. I just wanted to comment that I found the report very helpful. It just gives us a clear update and a clear next steps. So thank you. That was a good report, and not having questions is a good thing. The sense of being assured around this. So thank you.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful feedback, I'm sure. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I will just go to the recommendations for this report. So we are being recommended that the IJB note the progress on implementation of the daycare and day opportunities model now known as Stay Well, Stay Connected. And we request a further update report in December 2021. I'm seeing agreement. I see Derek's hand up. Derek.
It's just a highlight, Chair, that recommendation B, I would propose that it should be instruct the Chief Officer, the partnership, to provide a further report.
Sure, so we can add that few words into recommendation B. Thank you, Derek. Okay, so I'm seeing no further comments, so thanks very much, Anne, and as I say, market position statement was a very good read, very interesting and easy to understand, which is always good for me. So thank you for that. Okay, we'll now move on to the supplementary procurement plan. So the way we'll do this is that if we go as far as page 310 of the pack, we can discuss all aspects of that in the public setting. If people have questions that are relating to the pack beyond page 310, we'll need to go into private session. Derek's hand's up. Derek, do you want to come in?
No, I'll give myself a row for not taking my hand down.
Oh, okay. And Neil Stevenson has joined us to talk to us on this report. Neil, do you want to just do a brief intro?
Hi, Luann. Yes, Chair. Yeah, I can do that. This report is, we've attached a business case, obviously, for this. It's new money we received from the Scottish Government, provided the partnerships for the delivery of the mental health strategy, specifically around Action 15. I have John Doherty here as well to comment on the more technical details of the report, if there's any questions around those. But really, we're looking for approval to go out to tender for 2 years with 2 extension years in order to spend this money in terms of a mental health and well-being service, a first contact service for mental health clients.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, John Donaghy. Do you want to say anything, or you happy just to take questions now from IJB members, if there are any?
Yeah. Hi, Luann, Chair. I'm happy to take questions. We've been to the board previously, so the board were very keen for us to progress with this. Unfortunately, it proved a bit of a challenge with the tendering and contracting processes, but we're here now and keen to crack on. But happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands up from people. We had a good discussion about this when it came to the IJB as a proposal. So this is really just the formality of getting the work moving forward. Maybe an additional thing to formalise would be where we see the progress around this. So once it's commissioned, and will it report into our Risk Audit and Performance Committee, just so that we close the loop? You know, does it become part of our sort of transformation agenda, and that's how the reporting would happen? I don't know if anyone can clarify that.
I think from our team's point of view, we would have our own contract monitoring framework, which feeds into the commissioning and procurement annual reports, which are circulated widely, Luann. In terms of the service itself, I'm sure it will report into the commissioning and procurement board, and also the ongoing reporting mechanisms they have in mental health services currently within the partnership.
Okay, so it would be coming into business as usual processes.
Yeah, most definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any more comments from people, so we'll just go straight to the recommendations, which is 2.1 of the report. And that is, we approve the expenditure for social care services as set out in the annual work plan at Appendix A. We approve the tendering exercise and subsequent award of a contract as set out in the procurement business case at Appendix B. And we make the direction as attached to Appendix C and instruct the Chief Officer to issue the direction to Aberdeen City Council. So I'm seeing people are content with that. I'm seeing no hands up. So we're delighted to see that piece of work progress, and yeah, look forward to hearing the other side of the tender for that. So thank you, Neil, and thank you, John.
Yeah, just to add, Luann, that we will be issuing the tender. It will become live hopefully in the next couple of days. We're just waiting for approval here, so we'll move on it straight away.
Great, that's excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. So Derek, if I'm right, we're just going into private session now for one item.
That's correct. That concludes the public session of this meeting of the board. And